call the meeting to order and start our introductions. I'm Keith Simon. I'm representing Secretary of State Perales as the board chair, and I will start and pass it down to the left here.
My name is Florence Butler, and I'm the consumer representative.
Michael Omendorf, Department of State.
Erin Finnegan, New York State Department of Health.
Amy Sensibi, Department of State.
Mark Mastrobuto, Department of State.
Carol Fansler, Department of State.
Kathleen Cassidy, Public Rep.
Mary Jo Moore, Department of State.
I'm Jim Hines, representing John King, the Commissioner of Education.
Aisha Battle, Department of State.
Whitney Clark, Department of State.
John Kennel, board member, hearing aid dispenser.
Dave Wallach, hearing aid specialist, board member.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I just looked up and checked our regionals, and I see that Sean came into the Buffalo site. I will let's go to Buffalo first and have them introduce themselves, please.
I'm Sean Newlands, otolaryngologist.
Ann Orsini, audiologist.
And New York City, please.
Anna Kim, otolaryngologist.
Akhil Qureshi, Department of State.
Thank you. Okay, I want to make a check. And although we're shy a few people from the board, we need 7 people for a quorum. We do have 7, so the board, it is an official meeting. And from there, let's move right on to the approval of the January 23rd, 2013 meeting summary. I believe everybody was sent a copy, but there's also a copy within the meeting folders. And
I move they be approved.
okay, so we have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody not in favor? Okay, so the meeting summary from the January 23rd, 2013 meeting is approved. All right, see, the next thing on the subcommittee and department reports. The first item is something that was brought up at a previous meeting, the use of a national exam versus the state exam. And I can report on that. I should start off by saying I don't have a lot to report at the moment. I did have a conference call with 2 of the people that had agreed to be on the subcommittee. Wasn't able to hook up at this point with Dave. Had a little bit of an email snafu on getting in touch with each other, so I have to finish up with that. But I can tell you that my discussion with John and Ed, basically, you know, it's our feeling, and I guess I speak with 2 hats here, one as representing the Secretary of State on it, but also I'm the supervisor of the exam unit, so I speak from that perspective as well. And you know, I made it very clear at the very beginning that you know, there was nothing. It's our opinion. I'll just start right off. It's our opinion and our desire to continue to use a state exam that we've developed. That doesn't preclude us from certainly sitting down and reviewing the content of it with our subcommittee members, who also are subject matter experts, and reviewing what's currently on it, updating it where necessary, developing new test items where appropriate if there are gaps at this point in it. And I told them very upfront, there's nothing wrong with the national exam model, the one specifically that you know, Fred had handed out information at I think 2 board meetings ago. The IHS. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the test. It's a fine test. So our basis is not to say, well, that test is no good, we're keeping ours. We just feel that ours serves its purpose. We don't give it a great deal. I mean, I think I've mentioned that from the beginning of time, that we probably test on average because of the way the law is and the way that the people come into the profession, the majority of them are audiologists. We have a small number of people that come in to be actual hearing aid specialists. We give it probably to about 20 to 25 people a year. The cost for it is relatively inexpensive for the applicants. They're entitled to their first written and the first practical for a total of $50. Anything that they have to retake is $50, whether it's for the written or the practical portion. And the national exam is much more expensive. It was in paper and pencil. It's going to a computer based, but even as a paper and pencil exam, it ranged anywhere from $95 to $175 or so. The computer version of it is even more expensive. But like I said, there's nothing wrong with the exam. It serves its that exam serves its purpose as well. We understand that it's used by a number of other states. So pretty much, I told John and Ed when I had the discussion with them that we're going to move to work on the other one. John has agreed to, Ed has agreed to. I've asked another subject matter expert, somebody else that was a previous board member, Doug Brown, if he would be interested in serving as a subject matter expert for the exam as well, and he has indicated that he has, so I have to get him out a security agreement that we make everybody sign. Basically, it's a confidentiality agreement and what is involved in being a subject matter expert. I did already get those back from John, Dave, and Ed, so we're good on that thing. And I'll be getting some additional information out to them on basically just what we look for in test items and how they're constructed. We'll never expect them to do the job of making it a perfect test item, because certainly their expertise lies in the material, not in the construction of test items. But certainly it helps to understand the process and what's involved in developing good test items. It's much more difficult than people would assume it is. It's multiple choice, and every one of us have taken numerous tests over the years, and if you saw some of the information and what goes into a good question, you would realize that you probably have taken plenty of exams that didn't have good, they weren't constructed well. I mean, things where you see choices of all of the above, none of the above, both A and C. Those fall into the fact that, the most simplest, if I could just explain it to people so you understand the difficulty in developing the questions and why it's good to have a little bit of a background, whether you're going to be the one responsible for that final version of it is. In multiple choice questions, you have a STEM, which is the question part of it, which should pretty much be the question itself. You should be able to determine what the answer is from that. And then you have the answer choices. You have a correct answer, and the other three are called distractors. And this is where you hear people talk about trick questions. And the idea is that when you have all the above, none of the above, that's because people couldn't come up with a plausible distractor. The idea is that people who know the material be able to pick out the right answer. The people who don't know the material shouldn't be able to guess the answer. And you increase the odds of guessing when you have things like all the above, none of the above, all, when you put all in an answer choice, because oftentimes nothing is all or never. And so they're kind of giveaways to discount that one, and then you're narrowing it down to 3 or 2. And it's very, it's difficult to come up with 3 choices that are plausible, dealing with similar matter, but not the right answer. And therefore, that's why people say, well, it's a trick question. There was more than one answer because they didn't know the material well enough, and the other ones look appealing to them. So we're going to head down that road. That was, our decision. So we're going to be proceeding that way.
When you say our, you mean your decision?
Well, I mean, certainly.
The state's decision.
The state's decision.
Yeah, okay. Not our decision.
No, I mean, not our decision, right. Certainly the board is, it's an advisory board. They've, certain people have made, their thoughts known on which way to go, but I mean, it's our ultimate, decision. So, that's where we go. So, that's my report.
Keith,
Sure.
question?
Yep.
I wasn't unfortunately able to make a connection and discuss this with you, but one of my questions with reference to the continued use of the proprietary state test, above and beyond the question of whether it's as effective or as accurate as it should be nowadays, was the issue of reciprocity for someone who, let's say I wanted to sell my business to someone who is not an audiologist from out of state who has a license from another state. Do they have to take an exam in New York State in order to become licensed? And to me, if you've owned a practice, you've taken the board, the NBCHIS exam, you've been practicing ethically for many years, to have to come into New York State and say, oh yeah, but you got to take an exam to do it, that's kind of, number one, stupid, and number two, an insult. And it makes my business less valuable and less marketable. And that would include an audiologist who wants to sell to someone who's a non-audiologist but qualified. So has that been addressed at all?
Well, and so let me just kind of cover that, because I think, John had a similar concern, not exactly the same concern, but also about reciprocity. And the fact is that if we're able to have a reciprocity agreement with another state, it would be one for one. So there would be no other requirements other than being in good standing. But I don't know that we have any reciprocity agreements for hearing aid, specifically. But that's reciprocity means it's one for one. You're good standing in that state, and you get a certification. You come in. There's no further requirements for you to make. As for when we don't have it, then there's other things to do. We have to determine if that other state has similar educational requirements, and that gets reviewed by our Education Bureau. So the test is not the only thing. It's not, well, everything else is okay, but you have to take our test. It would be, everything has to be similar. You still would then end up having to take our test. I mean, certainly that's something that could be, addressed, I suppose, in a fix to say, look, if everything else is approved, that we would also accept other exams. I don't know. That would probably be I'm not sure, a legislative or a regulation change. Probably legislative.
Thank you. Thank you. And actually, that's something that was on the agenda under an action item. Ed did call and ask us to table that until the next board meeting, but I can address it briefly. 2 meetings ago, he gives excellent recommendations for the type of experience we should be looking at to allow out-of-state practitioners to obtain a license in New York. So I've taken a look at the statute, and unfortunately it would require statutory change, because right now we have a very specific statutory provision that requires us to look at the other states' requirements to see if they're comparable. So I have discussed that with our legislative council, and we're going to be looking at making that a departmental legislative amendment for this coming session. So I'm going to be working with Ed. If there's anyone else who would like to work on it, I'm going to start putting some language together. So I think that really is the core issue. We have a very tight statutory requirement that really limits what we can allow and who we can look at as far as a reciprocal licensee.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
Thank you. When I spoke with Keith, he had some good pertinent issues that he presented that gave the state some problems in making changes. The Department of State has some problems in making changes, and I understand because of the law and the way things have been done. But I look at it from a little bit more of a conservative standpoint, and I try to see things from a point of what is needed and how to save some money. And I brought some points up, and the cost reductions to me was a no-brainer. The exam is maintained, it is updated, it is changed as needed by audiologists and doctors to make it an exam that's acceptable by the 39 states and the 4 Canadian provinces that accept it. I brought up the fact that your boss, the head of the Department of State, Division of Licensing Services, had said he wanted to look at the reciprocity issues. And I saw this as being a way of accommodating that in the northern borders and some of the less accessible areas by Canadian dispensers coming into the state, in addition to bringing bringing in additional monies through registrations from these other bordering states and Canadian provinces into New York, because they'd have to register with the state of New York. Saving money would be the effort to maintain testing facilities which wouldn't be on the backs of New York State taxpayers, nor the responsibility of the Department of State to follow through by that any longer. These things to me, they seem like good points, and they should not just be thrown out the window, but looked at. All right, is there a way that we can try to use some of these issues? Cost to the test taker is irrelevant, because it costs $50 to apply for a test with the state of New York. That's totally irrelevant. There are expenses put into maintaining an exam like this by a private entity. If somebody wants to come into a field, they have to spend money to come into a field. That's it, period. The $250 cost, again, as opposed to $50 cost, that's not the state's responsibility, nor would they care. Or if it's even less than that, I don't even know. People entering the profession, either they want to go into the business or not go into the business. Now Keith brought up a good point about the 64 credits. Some states don't have a mandate for 64 credits. Our 64 credit mandate is a joke, because it requires nothing. I can go to school for agriculture and then become a hearing instrument specialist in the state of New York, and totally irrelevant. A plumber, and who's a good plumber, has more experience doing what he's doing than somebody going to school for 64 credits and nothing. Okay. Anyway, that's my
question here in New York.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, if someone could explain to me who develops the national versus the New York State exam, and what's the major difference between the two?
Well, I mean, I'll speak from, we developed the exam along with the help of subject matter experts, which are a group of people that, in our case, volunteer their time to us. So they come from the field. They're either audiologists, they can be doctors, they can be hearing aid dispensers. We look for a variety of people to sit in. So, and the national exam would be done similarly. I mean, they all rely on subject matter experts to develop the test items. So, that's, they're similar in that sense. I don't want to say they're exact, but, so that, I don't know if that answers your question.
But in terms of the content of the exam, do you know what the major difference between the two are?
Well,
why is it?
I'm sorry.
Why is there a need for a national versus state? What's the content difference?
I don't know that there is any kind of a major difference in the content. I think that the national exam and the people that would be pushing for the national exam is that it's used by 39 other states, and that it somehow helps with reciprocity, and that may be true in some instances, though I will speak to a couple of the points that John brought up that we had discussed. And one of them has to do with the exam itself is not the hindrance to people coming from other states. It's really not. The exam is not, it's no more difficult or less difficult than a national exam. Part of the problem, like Whitney had spoken to, and and even John brought up himself, is the educational requirements and the fact that our law is pretty specific that the other states have comparable requirements, and oftentimes they fall a little bit short of ours. Ours are pretty strict. They include that 2 years worth of college. Regardless, I agree that it's not specific. So, certainly that might be something that's looked at as well when they're looking at the whole out-of-state experience thing and how to accomplish, making it easier to go from state to state. And if I could just kind of go on to a couple of the other points that John made and at least give, my point of the thing is that, the cost for test sites, the cost for developing is not solely to the hearing aid dispensing exam. Because we license so many other exams, other disciplines that require exams, it's the same staff that handles all of them. So it's split up amongst a number of different exams and license types. The test centers are not held and not used strictly for the hearing aid dispenser exam. So even if we were to farm it out, if we could, we'd still be using those sites on those days because that test is given along with a number of other exams. So it doesn't really, it doesn't really save us any money on test sites. We'll be running those test sites anyways. It's kind of split between all of them. I guess, like I said, so I'd like to respond to all of them. The cost to the applicant, well, I mean, you might see that as just a cost of doing business, but I believe, in New York, we're looking to, drum up business, and the cost to do business is the cost to do business. There's a big difference between $50 to a person and $250 or $200. At the same time, it's easy to say, that there's companies out there that do the whole licensing thing if you really want to go that far, and you could say, well, it doesn't cost the state anything because they pay it to the company who has agreed to, do this function. Well, I mean, I think if your license fees went up to $1,000 or $2,000 because it doesn't cost the state anything and we've allowed somebody else to do it, you might have a different perspective about that cost, the fact that you don't really have to take an exam at this point. And there's not a lot of people that come in that way, so.
Okay. Please, I can't let this go. As a hearing aid specialist, as somebody who doesn't have an audiology degree, I have a bachelor's in audiology, but I don't have a master's or a doctorate. When I entered this business as a dispenser, first of all, when I entered this business to begin with, I did not have the board certification. I didn't feel it was necessary. That was who I worked for. I was learning, et cetera, et cetera. And I worked for a manufacturer and actually spent a lot of time training people and talking to people, including audiologists, about how to fit hearing aids, which was kind of interesting because I didn't have that minimal qualification. When I became a dispenser in New York 20 years ago, when I bought my practice, the first thing I did was sign up for the board certification exam. And the reason I did that was because it is a very, very, very comprehensive exam. It was back then, it is now. And I'll tell you, I studied for that, pardon the expression, damn exam so hard. And when I took it and when I passed it, I thought, thank God I'll never have to take this thing again, because it was very, very difficult. Now, I know the New York State exam apparently is quite difficult too, because there are people who have problems with it, okay? One of my problems, though, one of the issues that I have, when John says it's a cost of doing business, and he says, well, we try to keep costs low. I'm sorry, I've owned a business in New York State for too long to realize, to believe that we keep the cost of business in New York State low in any area. But the fact of the matter is that anyone, any dispenser in New York State or anywhere else in the country should be looking to at least get that board certification, because it gives it's a standard of minimal qualification, just like our exam is. Our exam doesn't say you know everything and anything that there could be in the world, but it is a very good baseline of knowledge. And that exam, the board certification exam, is reviewed constantly. It's a psychometric test, and I know that you have people who do psychometric tests when we talk about good questions versus bad questions. Their questions are good questions. They're not ambiguous, and it is updated constantly, which is something that I think brought up this whole topic, because to the best of our knowledge, we don't know whether it's been updated constantly. And the industry has changed so much in the 20 years that I've been involved. Back then we were fitting hearing aids with little screws and saying, how's that sound? And now everything is very computer-based, and we can do so much adjusting compression ratios and knee points and all kinds of things, and noise suppression characteristics. The technology's changed a lot, and the testing, to some extent, has changed a lot too. So it's really important that the test that people are being given reflects what the current state of the industry is. And the reason this got brought up is because there was a serious question, in my mind anyway, that our exam wasn't really doing that anymore, because we have no way of knowing. It's the old, what's being done undercover, because to try to keep it secure and safe doesn't give you the security of knowing whether or not it's really current and whether it's accurate and whether it's valid. And that's what brought all this up. I have no question that the board certification exam from the National Board for Certification is valid and it's current. I don't have that level of confidence in New York State's test. And the purpose of reviewing this exam now, if you're going to keep doing it, is to try to find that out. But if we find out that it isn't, we're still going to use it. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit frustrated, and I apologize that I didn't get to have the conversation with you, but I'm a little frustrated the decision was made on the part of the Department of State without, it sounds like it was made before the discussion was held. That to me is frustrating because, again, we're an advisory board, so I guess I shouldn't have had any other expectations. But when we first started with this advisory board many, many, many years ago, we had a lot of input in trying to get things set up. And in this case, I feel that we've been asked to sort of give lip service to something, but the state's going to do what it damn well pleases no matter what. And that's not a very comforting feeling with reference to the level of confidence in the testing that's going to be done.
Can I just interject? In terms of the examination that David is talking about, the board certification, I think, and this can be clarified later when you let Fred speak, I think that this international licensing exam is much more comprehensive in its components than even the exam he's talking about. I am not a guy who puts the test together, but it's just from what I've reviewed and I've read. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. He can verify that. In addition to the fact, training for trainers of dispensers is actually structured, and they have a course for trainers to be able to train dispensers for that licensing exam. All right, thanks.
And like I said, we appreciate everybody's, comments on it. Not that we all agree on it. I will tell you that the content outlines for our exam and for the IHS exam are similar. I mean, I've looked at them. I know what ours is. Certainly, when we look at the current exam, when the subcommittee looks at it, the subject matter experts, weigh in on things, we certainly can make it whatever, you deem, if you deem. I mean, I know what's on the exam, so I can tell you that there is, although it may, have some things that you feel are out of date, there's not a lot of technology questions on the test, so it's not referring people to understand, old technology as compared to new technology. A good portion of it has to do with.
That's scary. That's scary.
Well, it is, but
because that's saying you're releasing them out there, and all they have to know is the law and the rules. But they don't have to know how to do it.
No. Well, that's not what I said.
This is a very technical field.
That's not what I said. But I mean, I don't think you would find on the IHS exam either specific information about specific hearing aids.
No.
Not on there. Okay, so you have a practical exam and you have a written exam. The written exam components are similar on both exams. You have, anatomy and physiology. You have types of hearing loss. You have things like that. Those things haven't necessarily. I mean, your anatomy and physiology, I don't think it's changed. It's the same. So I mean, they don't necessarily get dated. I mean, those types of questions don't get dated. I think you have to. We're going to be looking at the written exam. I mean, at some point that may then turn into the practical as well, and some of the other concerns may get addressed there. John is certainly, familiar with, the practical portion of it. But like I said, for hearing aid dispensers, we don't give that many exams, so there's not a great deal of people that are taking the full exam. And that's not to say, well, we could just give whatever we want because there's a few people, but certainly it is working, and I believe John can attest to that. And like I said, there may be some review and updates to that exam as well. That would come afterwards.
Just closing comment on my end. I have nothing against the Department of State's exam. I'm not emotionally involved. I have no gain or benefit from it whatsoever. If the exam is hard, it's not supposed to be easy. I want it to be hard because, unfortunately, I see people trying to slide into a field that might embarrass me, and those people don't deserve to pass, and they're not going to pass if those of us that are there to stop it from happening, if they're gonna do damage to the people. I merely looked at, from cost perspective, saving money for the city of New York, state of New York, and the reciprocity issue, which I thought was gold. Just considering that we're bringing in more revenues from those dispensers. I'm looking at the numbers here. We don't have a hell of a lot of us out there. I mean, geez, it hasn't changed much in the last 12 years since I've been there, you know? So, all right, well, that's
Okay. At this point, well, I'd certainly like to move it along.
Go ahead.
The next subcommittee and department report is insurance for hearing aids. And I don't know who was somebody reporting on that? Okay, so Mr. Vahale is running, he was running late, I believe he had some kind of an issue. So I do know that this is a topic that there's probably some people here who would like to speak on as well, but I believe Carol sent everybody a letter from, I believe it's an audiologist working at a family hearing center who sent a letter to the governor, and that was in your packet, and you know that dealt with it, and I'm not sure if people read that as you know at all. Now, Florence, I don't know if did you want to speak at all on this topic? I mean, it is.
I'll say a little bit.
I mean, the other thing I would, point out to just probably start with, and Whitney can stop me if I'm incorrect, is that, the board certainly can weigh in on the topic and certainly make their thoughts known on it, but we don't actually regulate insurance. So just, want to make that point, clear. But Florence, there you go. You don't really need to speak.
I just want to say that I'm glad we're on to a new topic, because I don't think we ever were going to come to agreement on the internet sales. I've done a little research, and I know what the laws are, what laws are being presented to the Assembly and the House, and also know that it's a tough issue right now because we have the Obamacare coming in, and whether our advice is taken very seriously at this point, it will be interesting. Most of the laws that have been proposed, or bills that are proposed, have a limit on how much money can be applied to hearing aids. Looking at Rhode Island, they went by the law, the Obamacare law, that know that they can't set a limit, and they're trying to have the insurance companies pay 80% and the purchaser pay 10%, and some of the others, another one might be 90% and the person paid 10%. So there's a variety of ways to go about it. I do think it's important that we talk about it. I work in a facility. We have lots of older people. They don't have hearing aids. They're all put on medication for depression. Might be better to provide hearing aids than give them medication. So I think it is important. How we do it, I think I'd like to hear other people's point of view.
Thank you. Anybody else have comments? You're here in New York, Buffalo.
I think we recognize that this is really, unfortunately, very much out of our scope of any practice. As much as we may have personal desires to see the insurances pick up, and the night shift coverage of $1,500 per year every 4 years is wonderful. I wish everyone had that. The reality of the situation is that insurance is not set up that way. That was a negotiated type of thing, and who knows whether it'll be there 5 years from now. And when Obamacare comes through, none of us knows what the end results are going to be, whether in any area of coverage. So I think for us to spend a lot of time talking about this is really a waste of our time, because although I think we can all acknowledge that we would love to see more insurance coverage and greater availability of hearing instruments. The reality is we have no impact on it one way or the other.
Anybody else have any comments or want to comment? Okay. I guess at this point we can open it up to public comment. Before we start in Albany, let me just double check. Is there anybody in either New York or Buffalo that's from the public?
No.
Nobody here either.
Okay.
I did see a lot of shaking of heads no, so I was going to go with it, but then I started reaching for the mute button, so I figured I'd let you answer at this point. Okay, we do have some members of the public here today, so I would invite them to step up to the podium over there. Please just introduce yourself, and if you can, we don't really have a limit, but we ask that you kind of keep it brief, and we do really don't have a back and forth, so it is a public comment period. Fred, did you want to speak?
Is there a mic here?
No, you can grab the one from up front if you would, please. If it reaches. If it doesn't reach, Fred, then just stand you can stand wherever it does. I just think we have a camera shot at the podium. If it reaches, we have a camera shot. Hold on a second. Carol's working on it.
There he is.
Where'd he go? All right, let me get you. Hang on.
You don't have
There you go.
Look, this is nice.
He had it set up.
Am I really tipping like that?
Don't fall over.
Yesterday was my 66th birthday, so maybe I am tipping like that.
Oh, God bless you.
Okay. Some questions were asked. Again, my name is Fred Goosen, and I serve in 2 or 3 positions. I am the territorial governor for the International Hearing Society, representing New England. I'm the executive director of the Hearing Healthcare Alliance of New York, which is the professional association of dispensers, dispensing audiologists, and I have been registered in the state of New York as a hearing instrument dispenser for the past 19 years. I've also dispensed hearing aids nationwide. Oh, this doesn't go louder, does it, to real people?
Right. Not to us.
And I've also been dispensing in Texas as well as Hawaii. Some questions were raised today as we were talking about the ILE, and quite honestly, John and David, the ILE and the NBCHIS, which is a companion certification, are both very, very similar in many ways. They're both nationally oriented and so forth. The ILE, the International Licensing Exam, is created by the International Institute for Hearing Instrument Sciences. They currently are, matter of fact, they are meeting this week. There are 14 individuals comprised of physicians, PhD audiologists, and hearing instrument specialists, as well as psychometricians, as well as consumers. They will be spending between 200 and 400 hours writing the questions for this year's exam. Writing the question and finalizing them, that they do have content validity, that they do have some retest stability, that they do have internal consistency, and extreme item analysis of each of those tests in relationship to the overall exam, in being a true indication of the abilities, capacities, and knowledge of an individual who will be registered as a hearing instrument dispenser and to perform their test in New York State or in the other 39 states that accept the test. It's a big effort, and I applaud the department for spending that much time and using psychometricians that are available to make sure that they have a test that focuses on that content validity and the ability to use it. And as I can see, you're all smiling and thanking me for that compliment of all the work that is done in that action. I appreciate it. And I also thank you guys. Mark and we talked a week or so ago, getting some conference CEUs approved quickly, and I thank you for your efforts in getting that back to me. They're always very helpful for us, as we are an educational association. But you asked some questions about the national exam. The national exam is, as I just said, being constructed this week. It covers all aspects of the outline for the exam here. It focuses on the reality of dispensing hearing aids. It is limited in its clinical approach because hearing aid dispensers do not diagnose. We do not analyze any type of, we dispense hearing aids. We are limited by our law in many ways. And to test for diagnoses or clinical decisions is actually expanding our scope of practice. I'm concerned about the clinical aspect of that, and in that fashion. I think that's something that should be of extreme concern, and I do hope that is not, because I hear summaries of the exam from people who have taken it, and most of the people who are taking the exam have no resources to go to validate what the questions are. If you were challenged, for instance, why is this answer correct? What resource did it come from in terms of what documentation, what book, so forth? Takers of the exam have no bibliography. Do they study Marc Chartrand? Do they study Frederick Mark? Who do they study to learn about masking? Which book does it come from? Many varieties of what to do with masking, although there's one basic program. What is the training procedure? How do you approve? And I know that the dispenser sends you an outline of how they're going to train their trainees. How do you evaluate that? What are the criteria for a training procedure in a practice in New York State? Exactly what do you say? Well, you might want to do it this way because you are okaying a way that they prepare for your exam. The national exam, yes, it is not $250. It is $95 at present. May expand your practice depending on the fashion it's going. It will be an online test accredited by ISET, and it will also be accredited according to psychometric evaluations. It will cost them, quite honestly, I serving on the board of governors of the International Hearing Society, $50 is ridiculous. It's so inexpensive. In the state of Minnesota, it costs $1,200 per year for a hearing aid dispenser to be registered and licensed. Because the dispensers in some of these states cover the entire cost of the licensing board. So our fees here are low, and I still think the right for you should still charge them $50 to take the exam, and then let them pay IHS, IIHIS to take the exam, and you'll still make money without the advertising. I'm still promoting, but that's all right. When someone comes to the state, my question would be to you, if they have taken the ILE, do you consider that similar to, equal to our exam? Would that be a check?
No. It's not.
No.
Hold on.
Yeah, that's another function of the law, where it doesn't cover that. So there's nothing for that. It just covers the requirements. It was never really hashed out whether the exam itself could be, but that's something that could be looked at, I think, along with that whole other package of things that they wanted to look for out-of-state experienced people to come.
I would think that would be very important to find out what kinds of things that this person has to know and learn in order to be a dispenser in that state. And if you've got 39 states and 4 provinces, considering this as the basis, minimal level of competency to dispense in that state, that it might be a very good balance or way for you to, that's one of the checkoffs that would seem to me could go quite quickly as opposed to background checks and the other issues, if you consider the ILE an exam that is equal to the exam here. And Dr. Kim asked a question about who's doing what and how are the exams developed. I hope I've explained a bit how the exam is developed by the International Institute for Hearing Instrument Sciences. It is a standard question development activity that occurs every year to update the test itself, and it is accomplished by a board of a group of 12 to 14 individuals, which include, as I said, audiologists, EMTs, otologists, PhD audiologists, research, as well as dispensing individuals from across the country. And is also reviewed by independent psychometricians to make sure that we do have those characteristics of content validity and also item analysis and in some sort of internal consistency.
Yes, thank
I
you
would
for the
encourage-
clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome. Finally, I would like to say, yes, the 50% passage rate is not good, it's not bad. My understanding in terms of certification tests, it's standard. I mean, as Barbara indicated earlier, only 40% of the people in California pass the bar exam. So it is not, but I think it would. But why is it? Do we know why it is a 50% rate? Does it have to do with the questions? Does it have to do with the training program or the resources which the people are directed to learn the material that's needed to pass the test? And I would greatly encourage the department to open that door to some of these people so they know, what do I study with? Do I use IHS has a very broad set of research and distance learning materials. Again, it's accepted as the basis learning program in 39 states. Would that be something where they could find the material, find the correct answers? You can't enter a course in college and they say, we'll see you on the 24th for the final exam. Here's the outline of the things you need to know. They tell you how to get there. I was a real estate associate and a broker. I passed the license. I also had a big book to read to understand what are they going to test me? How do I learn these things? I think it's very important. I would encourage the department to work on that issue. And of course, we at IHS are more than happy to help you, give you the information you might need to look at the kinds of materials that are available. I'm the guy who very much supported the state exam back in 98, 99, working with a number of people, and I applaud you on your efforts. But I also very much support the idea that you've got 26 exams to write, and you're spending a lot of time to test 20 people. That load should be taken off, but that's the end of my promotion. I'll go back to IHS. They couldn't sell it. We got to take all these guys out to dinner sometime. But overall, thank you very much. That's the limit of what I'm talking about today. I'm very encouraged. I would like to have the internet issue addressed. I know it was addressed a year ago, and there was a task force set up. A number of states have taken some action, and you're going to be put in position to say what is that. Do we have any requirements that if you sell hearing aids over the internet, the person who buys them has service, or do you just get them in a box? Are they certified to sell? And I think we also have a case in the state which currently they're internet selling within the state itself, and I do know that IHS and John Hesper would be more than happy to help out on that, because address that issue on a number of occasions. Otherwise, thank you very much. Thank you for getting back together. Keith, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Fred. Whitney, Fred mentioned something about the internet. I didn't want people to think it's a completely dead thing. Is it something at all? Just
Yeah, I'll pass it down. Yeah, and I'd like to just give a brief update on where we are in the internet sale issue. Counsel's office has received an enforcement case partially against Innovative Health regarding the sale of hearing aids over the internet. The respondent's attorney has raised some interesting arguments about a possible federal preemption. So we're in the process of researching the legal issue before we bring the matter back to the board. And unfortunately, because I do have a pending enforcement case, I really can't say much more about it at this point, but I want to assure you that we are still actively looking at the issue, and we should have a report for the next board meeting soon thereafter.
thanks. Now I'd like to open up the floor to any new business, if anybody has any new business to bring forward.
I have. I just wanted to spread the word that we have a vacancy for an audiologist on the state board, the state licensing board. We have a statutory requirement for 3 audiologists, and we have 2, both in the Rochester area. And we're looking for geographic diversity, some practice diversity, the 5-year term renewable for a second 5-year term. So I wanted to let people know that, and if they have any questions, they can contact me.
She's talking about their board, not ours.
Do you know if the public member vacancy is still open?
We have a public member who I believe was just renewed for a second 5-year term.
Florence, just to be clear, talking about the professional licensing board, not our board.
Okay, that's a different board. Though.
Right.
Okay, that's what you're saying.
We still ourselves have 4, and I assume we'd always be interested in, having recommendations. I'm not sure what's going on. I know they were able to fill some. We still have some open. So one for a hearing aid, one for a public. Actually 2 hearing aid dispensers, 1 public, and an audiologist who dispenses. So certainly would help to get those filled as well, although we don't fill them. But recommendations, if people know people, we always take those and try to pass them on as well. So, anybody else with new business? You could go toward adjournment now. Carol, are we going to just contact people with an upcoming date, or?
Yeah, I don't have one yet. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we will contact people with the next meeting date. At the same time, everybody will get a copy. We'll send out the meeting summary again, and for you to review before the next meeting. I want to thank everyone for coming. A motion to adjourn. Dave, seconded. Florence. Everybody in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Didn't think so.
Oh, I spent a little more
Thank you
time.
very much.
Everybody.